If you think of, this is another reason for HR professionals to kind of move out of that transactional phase. Those transactional things will go away. We are seeing really large companies who can do away with whole departments because of AI. AI isn't going to take your job, but somebody who understands AI may. And I asked this question in an interview. I asked, what the person knew about AI. And I don't really care if they know AI. I want to know that somebody who's joining an HR team is forward thinking, is at least paying attention to what's going on, not just what's right in front of my face, what's going on in the wider world. And I want to know that they're learning. And I think AI is just another thing, generative AI particularly, is another thing that we need to learn about. It's another skill that we need to have.
Tracie Sponenberg specializes in aligning company people strategy with company business strategy in distribution, manufacturing, and other related industries. She's passionate about the employee experience, generative AI, all things HR tech, the link between well-being and organizational health, and helping companies with hourly employees and deskless workers transform from paper first to people first. Tracie is the co-founder of the companies Disrupt HR New Hampshire and HR Rebooted, and is a keynote speaker on technology, leadership, branding, and all things HR. She also received the OnCon Global Icon Top 50 Human Resources Professional Award and the Rye Perry HR Hero Award. Tracie, welcome to Voices of HR.
Thank you, Berta. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here. And that bio is stellar and incredible. But the one thing that we didn't get to talk about yet, that you're really known for, at least on social media, is that you are a coffee connoisseur.
I am, I guess. I didn't drink coffee until my 30s. And then, it's a funny thing. It's the thing I get the most comments about posts, but I'll take it. It's fun.
I love your posts. I love your posts on coffee because I love coffee as well. And so I'm living through you. I'm kind of a one coffee.
Oh, one coffee. Oh, this is my third. And I'm not a Dunkin' Donuts person, but that's a story for another day. But it's never just about coffee. It's always about more than coffee, but they're fun to post.
It is. It is about more than coffee. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Let's jump in here. So you're a transformative HR pro. You are a fractional CHRO. So will you clarify for our audience what exactly is the benefit of being a fractional CHRO?
I think it helps to describe what it is first. And I think if you ask a number of different fractional CPOs or CHROs, you'll get different answers. But the way I like to think of it is fractional is long-term part-time. So any particular client has a fraction of my time. And fractional leaders have been around for decades, maybe even longer, but been around for a long time. But we just probably over the past couple of years started seeing the term fractional emerge, and it's really taken off, particularly in the HR space. So I'm doing what I did previously when I worked in corporate, but just for different clients and through my own business. So I'm accountable certainly to clients, and I need to make sure that I'm doing good work. But at the end of the day, I'm mostly accountable to myself. And that's one of the huge reasons I wanted to make that shift.
Yeah, there's so many benefits for companies to hire fractional CPOs, CHROs like you that maybe don't have the bandwidth to hire full-time, but they get all of your experience.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think that's definitely part of it. It's money. It's a financial situation. If you don't have the money, you're small, you're scaling to hire somebody full time, then usually you can get a fractional executive for a fraction of the cost. And I think maybe the bigger reason though is you're really generally tapping into people with decades of experience, with a lot of experience, who've worked for a number of different companies, who can bring this level of expertise who can step right into your organization, assess, get working with you, leave the day to day to the regular HR teams, and really partner with you to bring your business forward.
Absolutely. So in HR, particularly industries like distribution and manufacturing, it's really seen more, and you just said it, the administrative team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times HR is looked at as an administrative function, much more so than a strategic one.
Right.
How do you think we can change the mindset, or how do you change the mindset within those organizations to really lift HR up? Obviously, there has to be administrative tactics. There always is in every function. But how do we help HR kind of rise to the occasion, the strategic occasion in their workplaces?
I think it's really when you don't see that, when you don't see a strategic HR team, first of all, we have to look at what strategic means. We throw that out a lot, right? And the way I think of it is thinking long term, right? Thinking long term, not just, which we tend to do, and I used to do, is what's in front of me right now. That's all I can focus on, and really thinking and planning and strategizing long term. And I think it's really two things that hold us back. It's either the CEOs, the executive team, or it's HR itself. And I get a lot of flack when I say that, but sometimes, and we have to acknowledge this sometimes we have HR leadership, and it as all things, it starts with leadership, right? We have HR leadership that's very comfortable in that environment where they're controlling the paperwork, they're controlling the administration, or maybe that's all they knew. I mean, I functioned like that for many years. That's what I knew. That's how I was trained. And that's what I thought HR was. So that's one side. And the other side is leadership teams or CEOs not understanding the incredible value that HR teams have, or that HR can do. So, it's very complex. And I think there's probably a fair amount of people leading HR that may not have the ability to think strategically, or may not want to, but I think there's more people that don't have the support of their CEOs and their leadership team and don't know how to get that.
Yes, I agree. And are there any specific stories or specific examples that you could give on how you maybe came into an organization and HR was looked at as a tactical organization, administrative function, and how you lent a much more strategic lens to the long-term plan for HR?
Yeah, I think a really good example is my last company that had just kind of come out of an HR department of one and had added another person to that team who hadn't been on there very long, but was doing largely administration, had transitioned from, I think her title was office manager, maybe even still when I started. And just, they didn't know what they didn't know. So they didn't know. They had an HR leader who was fantastic before me, but she had to do everything, literally everything. And when you're a department of one, you can't necessarily be seen. It's harder to be seen as strategic. It's not impossible, but it's harder. So she had it within her. She went on to teach school, but she just didn't have the resources and the people to be able to do that. And so I came in and to a really tiny team of 1.5 and all paper processes, and asking to do things like going to industry events and overhaul the technology, and they're like, what is going on? I think. And it took the relationship with the CEO. He had such a strong relationship with my predecessor. That took a long time to really get on solid footing, and it took a long time for us to understand each other. And really, over time and over the course of my time there, we really did transform from an administrative department, HR department, to a people team, and a literal award-winning people team solely focused on the people experience. So it was really fun to watch. It was fun to work with the team. It was fun to see everybody's reactions to that change over time and what we did. And it was really a wonderful experience for me overall. Not there were a few years in there, like the COVID years, maybe
Yeah.
not so much. I'll give those back, but.
I think every HR professional would love to give those years back, but learned so much, I'm sure, through the process. A couple of things that you just touched on, though, were when you think strategically, one of probably the best places for whether you're a consultant or you're just coming into a team or you're trying to kind of refresh HR and maybe elevate its position at the table is the employee experience. Can you talk to us a little bit about why that's so important for organizations today? And maybe a couple of tips on if you're going to embark on maybe at least even documenting your employee experience, couple tips and tools for our audience.
Sure. So I look at everything now through the lens of the employee experience. And I found, and this is very common for companies, it's one of my clients is like this. I've found that we as companies tend to design things based on what we think, or, maybe what some of our current people think, or we get a few people in a room if we're lucky and we design things that way. And so one of the things I've noticed in clients and companies is that if you look at everything from the application to, processes internally, how they're designed, they're often not designed with the candidate, with the employee in mind. So when I come into a client and when I've gone into companies, everything that I do is focused through that lens. So, up from applying to jobs and trying to figure out what does that look like from a candidate experience, or asking candidates or asking new hires and what that's like. And then mapping out every part of that journey from before someone starts to think about coming to work for a particular company all the way through when they leave. And that should be consistent in a way that it's consistently positive, and it should also be unique to the individual. In my last company, our purpose for our team was co-creating an incredible individual people experience. So we were working with our people to make that experience as positive as possible. Even when somebody leaves, even when somebody has to leave in a tough way, not of their own volition, that can be done in a way that's compassionate and empathetic and humane. And so really with clients, that's my specialty, is looking at every point along the way, and mapping that and figuring out a way to make that more focused on the person. And that's everything from, handbooks to forms to how easy is it to do something like access your 401k money if you have a terrible emergency, that you need to do that. How easy is it to tap into these resources that are so important to people? And there's a lot of different tips and tricks. I think, I lean on my network really heavily. So I think getting together regularly with people who do what you do is really helpful. Asking friends and family or people who don't do what you do, what they think of their resources at their HR department is actually even more helpful in some ways. And then I love a tool called PIN, PYN. It's a free employee journey map. They do lots of things, but it's a very forward-thinking company, but they have a free employee journey map where you can take every part of the employee journey and, like it says, map it out.
So it's a good template to at least start with.
Good place to start. Yeah, good place to start. And if you don't know, well, what is an employee journey? What are these points along the way? How do I build these moments that matter? It's a really great place to start, and it's free.
Absolutely. And is that pyn.com or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. For our listeners, we will put that in the notes section so that you can easily access this if you're interested in building out your own employee experience. What are you seeing? Okay, so we're hearing you're known for your expertise in technology. AI is just everywhere, not just in HR, but just it's on CEOs' minds. It's a top 5 topic for CEOs in 2024, so it should be on HR's top list as well. The CEOs are thinking about it; they should be as well. How is AI transforming HR at the most simplistic level and then maybe at the most advanced level?
I think it's going to transform HR and everything into ways that we can't necessarily see. But I've been saying that for, a year and a half now, and it's not quite there. I think that as HR professionals, we don't have to be AI experts. I'm not. I got in kind of early because I had an interest and tried to stay up on it and, have these personal subscriptions to different generative AI just so I can kind of play around and learn. We don't have to be experts, but we have to understand it and not fear it because it is coming. It is here and it's going to revolutionize. And it's going to revolutionize what we do. Could be a negative way if we don't have guardrails around it. So we have to make sure that we do. But it could be really positive. So it can do things that, 30 years ago when I started in HR, I could never even conceive of, and save us time and energy and money and focus on the things that really matter. So, the way I'm using it a lot is kind of as a thought partner, talking out different scenarios. It's a pretty good coach. You kind of have to check everything. I think it's going to change us in the way we analyze data. I think that trips up a lot of HR teams. So it's going to give us a lot more capabilities there. It's going to certainly automate a lot of the day-to-day. So emails that you send, any points along that journey map. That's one of the things that Pin does is kind of automates that journey. And I'm not, by the way, affiliated with them in any way. I just really love the technology, and it is Pin HQ. So I think I said pin.com. It's pinhq.com.
Pin HQ.
And so I think it's almost there, but we're not quite there. I'm waiting for the day like, hey, make this slide deck for me. Here are the 15 things I want to cover and make it look really pretty. And there's we're kind of almost there, but we're not quite there. But I think right now HR professionals should be watching and learning and absorbing all that they can. And there's some really great people like Amanda Hawley and Teresa Fessenstein who are doing great work in the HR space, particularly to HR, Johanna Sunlow out of Europe. And, I'm trying to follow along with them and learn and watch and grow.
Yeah, AI, it's interesting because there is so much hype out there, and sometimes you get a sense like it is the end all be all. It's going to solve so many things, and it instills fear, I think, in a lot of HR pros, and are the HR teams then going to go away just as they got their seat at the table through the pandemic and they're starting to be viewed as a strategic HR partner? Now is AI going to come in and blindside them? And I always tell my clients, don't get too far ahead of your skis here. Like, there are limitations to it. There are things that it can absolutely help you with today. I know a lot of job descriptions. It's being used for that. It's being used for a lot of resume writing or even presentations. But to your point, it may get you 70% there or 60% there. But you still have to use your critical thinking, your quality checks, all of that to make sure it's right. Would you agree?
I would. And I think that if you think of this is another reason for HR professionals to kind of move out of that transactional phase, those transactional things will go away. And we are seeing an impact, really, really large companies who can do away with whole departments because of AI. But it's the way I heard, and I don't take credit for this, but I heard somebody talk about this. AI isn't going to take your job, but somebody who understands AI may. And I asked this question in an interview for a client, and I had a conversation after. They're like, why did you ask that? I asked, what the person knew about AI. And I don't really care if they know AI. I want to know that somebody who's joining an HR team is forward thinking, is at least paying attention to what's going on. Not just what's right in front of my face, what's going on in the wider world. And I want to know that they're learning. And I think AI is just another thing, generative AI particularly, is another thing that we need to learn about. It's another skill that we need to have.
Absolutely. So pairing those two things together, the employee experience and AI, if you were building out your employee experience, where would you potentially think about leveraging AI first?
I think if you think of anything that you do or somebody in your team does that takes a lot of time and doesn't really add to the employee experience, maybe the end product is worth it, but that time to get from beginning to end isn't. So anything that involves sending things out on a regular basis. So, you'll be able to, and you can now with some tools, you'll be able to automate, say somebody joins the company and you can have all of these links automatically sent instead of typing an email to join, or, sending them a Slack to join this. That can all be automated. Things like pulse surveys, any kind of questionnaires, a welcome email or video from a CEO, a 90-day onboarding plan, anything that's a thing will be able to, or can now in some instances, be automated and take time away from somebody doing something else. So I think those moments that matter, that's really ripe for AI to get in there and kind of do its thing. But we're not fully there yet. We'll be there hopefully soon, but and analyzing too, like getting in. I for a client, I dumped a bunch of anonymous data in and said, explain this to me. What do I have to watch out for? And it did a beautiful job. And so it's there now, but it's going to get even better. I love talking about it, but yet I feel like I've been saying for a year and a half, it's like not quite there. It doesn't quite do what I want it to do, but it will.
Yeah. Yeah. So your advice then to our Voices of HR audience is familiarize, educate, embrace to some degree, know its limitations, but know that it is the train that has left the station and you need to become very familiar with it.
Yeah, you have to be. I did a talk about a year ago that I was talking to a group of HR professionals. And I think at the time, so this was maybe in April 2023. So maybe one or two people had used ChatGPT. And I said, in 6 months, probably all your hands will go up, right? And maybe not all of the hands will go up, but certainly everybody knows what it is. A lot of people didn't even know what it was. And certainly everybody knows what it is. And more people are playing around with it. And I think it's here to stay. And if you're a lifer like me, you've been in HR your entire career. I'm in my 50s. Like, you can either go, well, I don't want to learn that new thing. Or you can go, you know what? I'm going to learn that new thing and I'm going to set myself apart and I'm going to, really dig in and move my career forward, because you will need to understand and embrace AI in order to move your career forward from now going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had your friend, Dr. Matt Pepsel, on the podcast.
I love Matt.
A few podcasts ago. He's absolutely terrific. And we talked to him about, what he was thinking about for the future at the predictive index and, what would the future look like? And, he had a very similar take on how HR pros can continue to advance their impact in the organization and tie what they know about all of this up to the strategy.
So I feel like HR professionals are very well positioned. However, I think we've done HR professionals a disservice too. I don't think we've stressed enough the importance of really developing business acumen, of getting business chops to be able to communicate on business terms when it comes to the people part. So too many times you see a weak relationship between an HR business partner, for example, and their business counterpart. And it's almost like they're speaking different languages. So HR has a real opportunity, in my opinion, to exercise next level leadership and really meet halfway, and probably have to go a little further than halfway, if I'm being honest, to try to win the business over. And that's why I think, to answer your question about the skills, I think business acumen and that translation bit of connecting and showing how the people practices directly impact the bottom line, not indirect. I don't need time to fill metrics, and I don't need even turnover is such a sort of an indirect measure. Show me how the turnover is affecting the bottom line. Connect those dots for me. right? I think that's where we start to understand better how HR can serve the business.
I know I like that guy for a reason. Yeah.
Right?
No,
Isn't he just amazing?
he's been wonderful. And he hosted my first podcast and my first webinar that I ever did years ago. So he's been a great champion in my career, and he's just really, really smart.
Yeah, he is. He is. And so humble. So modern HR pros, we talked about this a little bit. They need to continuously learn. They need to network. They need to develop themselves, particularly around, I would say, strategic agility. Because now that the chair has been pushed up to the big table, I think a lot of them are kind of questioning how they get there. Are there any particular ways? You had talked a little bit about relationships or joining certain organizations. Are there any that you recommend that would help accelerate
Organizations?
the professional development?
Yeah, I think there's some that I like that I'm a part of. There's a company called Troop HR, and that's a really wonderful organization, and they do community really, really, really well. And I've really enjoyed it's also relatively affordable. I've really enjoyed being a part of that. There are some local HR groups that I think are really good, but I tend to skew more toward recommending things like Troop HR and Hacking HR, which I really love. I think they do community well, and they do it really well on a global scale. So I've done a number of talks with them that are virtual, and there are people from 40 different countries on those talks. And so you're learning, and you're watching the chat, and you're learning from people. And usually on the panels, there are people from around the world. So we tend to think of things sometimes, by we, I mean me, in a kind of centered where we are. And if you're mostly US based businesses, you tend maybe not to always get that global perspective. So I think getting that is really important, whether or not your company is global, but that global perspective really lends itself really well to Hacking HR. And I really love that organization a lot. Enrique Rubio, if you don't follow him, you should. He's taken that from almost nothing in the past 6 years or so and built up this incredible community. And then, I have a small community called the HR Rebels. I have a, even smaller community that I'm part of that, we kind of all get together and support each other informally. So I think there's formal ways, there's informal ways, but I really think finding your community is everything, because those folks are going to lift you up. And I've had the opposite experience with people who did the opposite. And so I really gravitate toward supportive people who will change you and challenge you, but support you in all that you do.
I love that. Those are all really, really great suggestions. I know our Voices of HR audience probably feverishly writing all of them down. So thank you for that. Let's switch gears just a little bit and try to end this on a positive note, which is, again, back to HR development. And because I think HR, a lot of times when I coach HR pros, it really comes down to they're having difficulty proving their value to certain individuals, maybe that are sitting in the C-suite.
Yeah.
These are individuals who typically are not inclined to think about people as people. They think about them as maybe productivity. They think about them as the KPIs, but they don't see them as real people.
Yeah.
How do you have any specific advice for our HR pros who are trying to get these individuals on their side and look at people as people?
Yes, it may not be what you're expecting, but yes, because this is one of the most common questions that I get too. So, and this is a little bit harsh, but try to fix it and then start looking, because it's extreme. If you are in a company with a C-suite who doesn't see your value, it's not your job to prove your value. It really shouldn't be an uphill battle. It can be done, but it's really, really hard. If you're in a company that doesn't value HR, it's going to be next to impossible for you to move that needle. So you can try, but if you can't, then definitely start looking, because you deserve to be in a place that sees you and values you for the unique contributions that you can make.
Yeah. It is. It's that
Really
thank you
hard.
for that
Yeah.
candid feedback, because far too often, right, HR is the one giving advice to everyone else,
Mhm.
helping them with their careers, helping them with training and development, as well as these strategic issues. And a lot of times they do not implement it for themselves, and
Right.
they don't know when it's time to leave. So in that same vein, you have an interesting take on best practices. Will you tell our audience about it?
Yes, I don't really believe in the term best practices. So I think that's maybe a little bit controversial, but I think there's a difference between broadly exclaiming that there are best practices and taking and learning from others, which I definitely do. But I think, especially for me being a fractional executive, I can't necessarily take one thing from my
Mhm.
client or past company into another one and just replicate it and expect it to happen. And so I think there are norms and there are things that are good, but I think using the term best practices, we have to be really, really, really careful, and we're often better off coming up with our own ideas and applying them to the unique businesses that we're in.
I actually love that, again, candor, because so often in my line of work as well, where I train and coach senior executives and upcoming executives, a lot of times I go into an organization and they want me, what's your program? And I tell them I have a toolbox, and
Yep.
depending upon where every person is at, they probably need their own type of personalized coaching. And yes, there's certain topics that we have to cover, right? Strategy and execution and inclusive teams and all of, those typical normative topics. But everybody starts at a different place. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, I totally get your feedback. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So you also are almost very adept at identifying HR trends, both challenges and opportunities for HR, let's say over the next year. Can you kind of share your feedback on that as well?
Yeah, I think I used to say I reject the notion of trends, and then I actually Googled what trend meant, and I think of trend as like a fad, like, oh, I'm going to wear, I can't wear skinny jeans anymore because they're not trendy, right? But it's actually something, going toward a direction. So now I've reframed how I look at trends, and so I think we talked a lot about it in this conversation. You can't talk about trends in HR without talking about generative AI. And it really is, Microsoft has Copilot, there is going to be, you're going to have a personal digital assistant. Everybody is just going to have that. There was a movie, I think it was called Her, with Joaquin Phoenix, that had the voice of Scarlett Johansson a number of years ago, that it's kind of going to be something like that. You have a personal assistant that's going to be like, hey, whatever you want to call your assistant, can you do this for me? Can you do that? Alexa, but times 100, right? So we're all going to have that coming forward, and AI is just going to revolutionize things. I also think the future is fractional, and I'm not saying that just because I'm a fractional executive, but when you think about it, I talked about this at a conference last year. Like, when you think about it, when you take a job, like I was a chief people officer, when you take my job and you take away the day-to-day things, and you kind of, if you removed me out of the business, like how much of what I did was strategic work, and how much of what I did, really was at moving the company forward? It wasn't 100%. So when you think of it that way, companies hiring, their next chief people officer, the next chief financial officer may get somebody who's 10, 20 hours a week, and they're getting an incredible thought partner, and they're getting some of the best, because so many people have left the corporate world to go out on their own, because you can do the work that you love and you can do it in a way that makes sense for you. So, I'd say I'm more left because the future is fractional than I'm saying the future is fractional and I left. But, that's one thing too. I think we're going to see a lot more too on how neurodiversity plays out in the workplace. And we're, certainly talking about that, but we're seeing, more and more kids, Gen Z, like kids and young adults, being diagnosed with, ADHD, autism, etc. In the workplaces, not all of them are necessarily set up to accommodate these unique needs or to accommodate physical disabilities. And, that's a real incredible, those are real unbelievable, talented workforces. And, that gets into DEI. And while I would never describe DEI as a trend, we've seen DEI get hit really hard over the past couple of years. And instead of kind of leaning away from it, we need to, bring it more into our companies. And so again, that's not really a trend, but that's something that I see HR professionals really trying to embrace and move their companies forward, because companies are better off with all kinds of people in an organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for that. So you have generative AI.
Yep.
Fractional work.
Yep.
And neurodiversity, particularly in Gen Z.
Yeah, I think, broader diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in general, but that's a particular lens for me. I have kids with autism, and so I think about how the workforce is designed or not designed for them a lot. I should have probably led with that because that's my particular interest. And it's with a few little tweaks, then workplaces can really harness the incredible talent in an underserved population.
Yeah. And if you compare that with the fact that, targeting bullying and abuse is actually getting noticed now by the EEOC, that's just another big exclamation point as to why companies need to pay attention to this, and HR needs to lead the effort and embrace these trends, because they are trends and they will affect the workplace.
Yeah. And it's also troublesome with the trend away from remote work, because that's such a comfortable accommodation for a lot of folks. So I don't mention that as a trend, but I think that bears mentioning, because that's a troubling, the complete return to the office that we're seeing in so many companies is troubling for things like reasonable accommodation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you think, so on the topic of remote work, any specific thoughts on that? It is troubling, because I do think it has its place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, every workplace has to, this is, again, you can't have a best practice. So every workplace has to really examine that. But I think if you look at it from a business lens, if you're fully saying everybody has to be back in the office all the time, or everybody has to be back in 4 days a week, you're losing talent and you're losing the ability to recruit talent. And if you're not, then you may be really seeing your engagement levels plummet. And what we need to be talking about more, I think, more than remote work or return to office is flexibility. So I live in the distribution space, and so people have to physically be in front of customers every day. So we can't accommodate remote work in a lot of situations, but we can accommodate flexibility. So I think that if we reframe that and talk about flexibility and talk about what is, fair may not be equal, and take it down to the individual level and really have those conversations, then I think that's a better way to approach it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our scheduled part of our program, but at the end, we do something called rapid fire questions. So these are 1-sentence questions with 1-sentence answers, so our audience gets to know you a little bit better. Are you willing to play?
I am. I'll try to keep it brief. So I've been drinking my espresso, so it's
There you go. So you're prepped. You're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. Question: what's the best compliment that you've ever received?
In a work setting, it was definitely you changed the way I view HR, and you changed me.
How did you land in HR? Is it something that you started out pursuing, or did it pursue you?
I was that weird kid in high school that knew that's what I wanted to do. I'm trying to keep it brief.
What's your first...
Okay.
No, that's good. That's good. What's your 90-day playbook as a new head of HR?
I think in the first 90 days, it's as a head of HR, I think it's a little different fractional, but as a head of HR, it's listening and learning, doing a listening tour, observing, but not making changes in the first 90 days.
When you get overwhelmed, how do you refocus?
I like to go for a quick walk or check out funny groundhog videos on Instagram. Chunk the groundhog really does it every time. Yep.
Every time. Every time. If you could have your own billboard that would reach millions of people, what would your message be?
I think, maybe inspired by Barbie or Ryan Gosling's performance, like you are enough.
What are you currently reading, or what have you recently read that you could recommend beside Dr. Matt Pepsel's book?
I never recommend business books because so many people do that. I always recommend checking out something that is fun. And I've been reading a lot of Lisa Jewell mystery books, and I've been reading a lot of historical fiction, particularly Fiona Davis. So I like to shut my brain off at the end of the night and read for half hour or so.
Very good. What do you wish everybody understood about your job?
That it's really incredibly difficult. HR is not easy. And I think sometimes people think that it is.
They do. What's the main takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
Surround yourself with people who lift you up and support you, and make sure you tap into your community, because if you don't have the answer to something, they do.
Where can people go to learn more about you?
I think I'm the only Tracie Sponenberg on LinkedIn, and I have a website that's traciesponenberg.com, and I love to connect with new people. So just send me a message on LinkedIn.
And if you want some good coffee posts, definitely follow her.
Weekends are when I travel. Yep, I'm going to Nashville, so I'll find some new spots there this week.
Well, we'll be looking forward to those posts. Today, we've been joined by Tracie Sponenberg, HR advisor and fractional chief people officer. Thank you again for joining me, Tracie. It has been such a pleasure.
Thanks, Berta.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much for watching. We would love it if you shared your thoughts on any of the topics we discussed in the comments below. And if you got value from the video, it would mean the world to us if you hit the like button and subscribe to the HRMorning channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Voices of HR.